Resident young person and comedian Pete Davidson teamed up with Judd Apatow to create The King of Staten Island, the story of a young man from the New York City borough that doesn't quite have his life figured out. A lot of the details from the on-demand film are inspired by Davidson's real life, including his time growing up in Staten Island, living with his mom, some of his mental issues, and his father passing away on duty as a firefighter. And all of these factors drive the narrative of the film in a much different way than Davidson uses them in his comedy.
That sounds amazing.
It's an earnest film about Scott, a 24-year-old aspiring tattoo artist, still out of sorts about his dad's death, and having to handle a big change in his life as his mom finally starts dating again, and he doesn't have the easiest time adjusting.
What are you talking about? All anyone ever does is worry about you. I was ignored my entire childhood because of you.
Oh yeah, I forgot that my childhood was so dandy.
The movie is grounded and gives off a weirdly relatable feeling that makes it feel honest and personal, but because of the tameness of how the plot moves, the movie also drags at certain points over its nearly 2.5-hour runtime. But even though it gets out of the gates slowly, The King of Staten Island catches back up with a good cast and atmosphere that leaves the audience with a touching, funny, and cool experience. Those familiar with Davidson's work will pretty quickly see how the movie uses certain parallels from his own life to build the story. In some ways, it's similar to the FX show Dave in that both main characters are clearly representing themselves and explaining situations or feelings that have a connection to experiences in their real lives. The difference is that Dave adheres pretty strictly to Lil Dicky's own life, while The King of Staten Island picks and chooses when to take liberties to guide the plot more, and I like that choice. Clearly, Davidson has had a whirlwind of a time growing up, with a lot of his late teenage years coming in the spotlight after he entered the comedy scene shortly after graduating high school and made the Saturday Night Live cast at just 20 years old.
College is bullshit.
So the concept of using issues and topics from his childhood and how they extend into his character's older days is pretty neat. You don't need to know anything about Davidson's life to get a full grip on the plot, but if you do, it's almost like a fun Easter egg. For example, Pete Davidson actually bought a house with his mom in real life in 2019 in Staten Island, so it adds an extra funny layer to the idea that instead of being able to buy a home in real life because of his success in his career, his character, Scott, lives with his mom because he hasn't accomplished anything.
I'm not a middle-aged man. I'm a 24-year-old man, and I'm going to my room because I fucking want to.
In the film, Scott and his mom Margie, played by Marissa Tomei, watch Scott's younger sister go off to college before Margie meets Ray, played by Bill Burr, another firefighter and the first guy she's been interested in since her husband's death. With all of the changes swirling, Scott obviously doesn't handle this particularly well, and while he clearly wasn't on great footing in his life before this happened, you see him become out of sorts and forced into a much more drastic position.
I'm fucked up as it is, Mom. Like, I have thrones, okay? There's something wrong up here. I can't find my watch. What are you trying to do to me here? Haven't I been through enough?
Apatow has a tendency to paint a lot of the main characters in his films as the lovable loser type, and that formula is in place with this movie as well, but it comes across a bit differently. It feels like in some of his older stuff, like 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, or Pineapple Express, the flaws in the characters tend to be the joke itself, compared to The King of Staten Island, where a lot of the comedy comes from the atmosphere while still adding to the serious and endearing nature of the movie. It's obvious from the jump that Scott is not a bad dude, but between a lack of direction, issues with ADD, and a rocky childhood, he struggles to reach the goals he has in life.
We were a little too mean.
Yeah.
He's nice.
Yeah, he's a really good guy.
He has a really good semi-romantic relationship with one of his friends growing up, Kelsey, played by Belle Powley, and Scott wants the best for her, from point A of the film to point B. But his indecision and lack of confidence muffle that message and put him in a place where he has to figure himself out first before he can figure it out with her.
You know what? You're right.
What are you talking about? I'm never right.
It's the same with his mom's new boyfriend, as he can't quite come to peace with the idea of his mom dating another firefighter that he doesn't particularly like anyway, but he doesn't actively attempt to ruin it. His mindset just pushes him to make some missteps that don't help either party.
Fuck that guy.
I think it's a grounded way to approach the story, and show how Scott develops over time, and the movie nails a lot of the key points of growth you want to see from him by the end, but it also takes a lot of time to get to that point. The benefits that come from having a more realistic, less over-dramatized storyline also leave the door open for some segments to just feel boring and uninteresting at times, and since the comedy is pretty subtle for the most part, if you're not digging the jokes, a good portion of the film may drag quite a bit for you.
That wasn't exactly a warm invitation.
It's not like the movie is doing anything wrong, and in reality, it's planting a lot of seeds for the third act to come along and tie the bow, but as you watch, it can feel a little sluggish. The performances are good though. I think Davidson really shines when he gets to pull out his jokes.
Father, you're my mom. I hope you're getting banged out real good. Who's the lucky guy?
And Burr and Tomei are clearly comfortable in their own roles. The film has good minor roles too, with Steve Buscemi playing one of Ray's colleagues at the fire station, and a couple of smaller cameos from musicians like Machine Gun Kelly and Action Bronson.
Oh, that fucking cocksucker, my father, and I hate him, and I love him at the same time, and I forgive him.
Speaking of music, the film's song choices are great, and really the whole ambiance of the movie feels like it was such a key focus. I myself don't know much about Staten Island at all, but the movie paints it like it's a place that's just a little behind the 8 ball.
We're like the only place that New Jersey looks down on. You could see the garbage dump from space. This place is never gonna change. No.
Davidson frequently pokes fun at his hometown in his stand-up, usually noting that it's a bit trashy compared to other parts of New York.
Don't get me wrong, I know Staten Island isn't all heroin and racist cops, you know? It also has meth and racist firefighters.
So it's no surprise that he does a lot of the same here, but the film never tries to make Staten Island seem bad, just a bit off color. The portrayal of the location actually mimics Davidson's character in a lot of ways, showing that the people may not be model citizens all the time, and the area might not be perfect, but change is possible and within its grasp. This is where Pally does a great job as Kelsey. She connects Scott's flaws and the issues with the area by wanting the best for both, but knowing that she needs to give a push in the right direction if she wants either to change.
I love Staten Island. It's amazing. And people are gonna see it soon, trust me.
For Staten Island, she wants to become a city planner and actively make a difference, whereas with Scott, she cares about him a lot, but knows it's up to him to figure himself out before she can be comfortable attaching herself to him. I think Pally's performance is great, and she adds such a redeeming quality to the movie, and the message feels stronger with her playing a role.
I know you think I'm great. I'm awesome. I feel bad that you don't think you're great.
One of the cooler parts of the movie is how Davidson portrays portions of his real life in the film compared to how he does in his comedy. Like I said, Davidson is quick to poke fun at his life with his stand-up and his time on SNL, from his drug usage and mental issues to his hometown and even his father's death. But in The King of Staten Island, a lot of those things are no longer the basis of the humor and are actually seen as vices for Scott. They're not negatives, but they're roadblocks, and it's interesting to see Davidson flip the joke on its head compared to how we're used to seeing him show those kinds of things off.
You're getting like really good at this.
Thanks.
This was also just a really good way for Davidson to break into more serious roles in movies and TV. It's not that his usual comedy doesn't have substance, but it doesn't tend to have much commentary behind it outside of the joke itself. That's totally fine, and it absolutely works. He's a fantastic comedian, but I love seeing him prove that he's able to put together an endearing performance about something meaningful. And what better way to show that than using emotions and events from his real life?
Jesus Christ, dial it back, you fucking fruits.
Davidson's character isn't the only one to do this either, as Ray is sort of the same way. Burr isn't really supposed to be that funny in this movie, but he still has that hardened, almost curmudgeonly tone that he uses in his comedy, and even though his role in the movie isn't there for big laughs, it still fits a different purpose with the familiar tone.
Why would I care?
I'm sorry,
Go sleep under a tree. I don't care.
I just dig the ambiance of this movie in general. It doesn't try to say too much, and it builds a rational, simple arc that's worth seeing through. Is it worth renting for $20 though?
This is a stupid question, right?
I don't know.
All right, who's fighting tonight? I want to fight somebody.
Objectively speaking, I think you'll enjoy what the movie has to say and how it says it, so if you get some of your friends together and pitch in, I don't think you'll be disappointed, but it's a relatively steep price for a movie that's not exactly designed to knock your socks off. It's a great exploration of a character and how he grows, but it's more pleasant than it is memorable. The acting and environment are great, but for $20 just to rent, it feels a little high.
He keeps saying that, but I don't know what that means.
I think if you like Davidson as a comedian and Apatow as a producer, you won't have a problem, but don't say I didn't warn you. Obviously, I think this movie would have been better served if a normal theatrical release was possible, giving people a slightly cheaper option, emphasis on slightly, if they wanted to go to the theater to see it, with a little extra bump to just watch it at home. The situation actually kind of reminds me of the issues that surrounded The Interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco. After legitimate security concerns rose because of the subject matter of an assassination attempt on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, theaters pulled the movie and it went straight to a VOD format online. I bought it when it came out and I thought it was funny, but was it worth it instead of just waiting until the price went down for digital purchase? Probably not.
Haters gonna hate.
Obviously, comparing these two movies is apples to oranges, and The King of Staten Island has much more value in my opinion than The Interview. It's touching in a lot of ways, and you can tell there was a ton of care poured into how the people in the environment were portrayed. Davidson does a great job expressing a world that we've never really seen from this side of him, and for that alone it's enjoyable, but adding in a competent plot that, if anything, moves a hair slowly, you have yourself a good movie.
Fucking home run, Todd.
Don't let the price tag scare you away instantly. I think if you get your hands on it, The King of Staten Island is a cool ride with fun moments that will leave you happy that you saw it.
What do you like to do, Harold?
I like superheroes.
Well, so does everybody.
No, I make up my own.
Oh, yeah? What kind?
Ice Flash.
What does he do?
He freezes stuff and shoots ice at people.
Oh, well, that's not gonna work.
Why not?
I can just use a hairdryer and ruin them. Keep thinking, though.